Hey, lovely writers. Welcome to this episode of Writing Brave, my author interview series. Today on the show, we have author and self-help growth pioneer, Jennifer Louden. Jennifer's most recent book is called Why Bother? And her most famous book is The Woman's Comfort Book, which was published in the early 1990s. Jennifer has been on Oprah and like zillions of other podcasts and shows, and I'm so delighted to welcome her to Writing Brave. And we're delving into why bother writing at all, and also how to be all the things and how to settle in this age of constantly being connected. Jennifer, welcome. I'm so excited to get to talk to you.
You know, the hair's not very good. I look like I have a lopsided ice cream cone, but here, let's try to make that a little bit better. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so the first thing I want to ask you is, lots of people in my writing community come to me and they've wanted to write a book for months or years or sometimes decades. And so I'm curious about like applying the title of your latest book to this question. It's like, why should they bother writing their book? And why should they like do it now instead of like thinking about doing it someday?
Why should they bother to write a book? So there's a couple answers that I give to this question with the writers that I work with. And one of them is, can you not bother? Mm-hmm. And this is really important. Writing a book, as you know, is really difficult. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have it burning in you where it's not going to leave you alone, great. Walk away. Yes. Then the second thing is, does it have to be a book? I'm always really curious. Is it a guided journal? You know, I did a guided journal that kind of goes with the book but stands alone. That was really fun. So fun. Is it a course? Is it a podcast? Is it a one-woman show? Like, could it take another form? We fed it, how do you say that word? We make it, thank you, out of books in our culture. And I love books. There are books all around me. Yes. I love books so much, but I've had to question myself. Is this a book? Does this need to have that form? And then does it have to be a big ass book? Yes. I was going to say that. It's like, could it be a mini book? So one of my clients said that she was like, maybe my book is a tiny book and maybe it's only like 80 pages, right? Because she had read, so this is my book, Catchlight. And she's like, does it have to be a 300-page novel? And she was like, no, it doesn't, right? And it unlocked like so much for her of like, what if it didn't have to be a 300-page book? It could just be like something smaller. Yeah. And if you want it to be a book that has that sense of holding it, you can make the trim size smaller, right? Yes. I have friends that have made millions off of books that have less than 40,000 words in them. Oh, it's so good. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Okay, so good. All right. So the next thing I want to talk to you about, so there's a small anecdote in Why Bother that was like hugely significant for you and also like for me reading it. I was like, oh my gosh. So this is the moment when you're trying to like make it as a screenwriter in LA and you're like banging your head against the wall. Like, I have to write not just a screenplay, but like the best screenplay ever. And it's going to make me millions of dollars, right? So no pressure, right? Like no pressure on yourself there at all. And you kept like having this sense of like, I need to let go of the screenplay. I need to let go of the screenplay. And like, it sounds like everything in you is like, wait, we can't let go of the screenplay. Like, that's the whole thing we're doing, right? And that when you let go of it, like the words, The Women's Comfort Book came to you, which became like your first and like a best-selling book. My first and my still, that book was published, The Woman's Comfort Book was published in 1992. It's still my single best-selling title. Oh my gosh. Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like my first question about this story is like, why do we ignore what we know? Oh, because it threatens our homeostasis. Our brains did not evolve to think and create. Yeah. Our brains evolved to manage our body. And to keep us alive. So when we come up with something that's going to use up a bunch of resources, you know, I'm sorry, why would we do that? The brain says. Then there's also a concept, and not as neurobiologically based, in my book that I got from Lisa Laskow Leahy and Bob Keegan at Harvard, and it's the emotional immune system. And that's the idea that just like our physical immune system, we need an emotional immune system that's saying, no, don't trust that person, no, don't speed, don't wait, something's wrong in this meeting. But the emotional immune system then, of course, doesn't know when to discern, just like sometimes our physical immune system doesn't if we have allergies or autoimmune disorders, et cetera. And so our emotional immune system doesn't want to do anything that thinks it's going to humiliate us. So you can see how those two concepts neurobiologically, your brain is like, I'm here to make sure there's enough glucose for stuff. I'm here to make sure there's enough salt. Yeah. I'm not here to make you a creator. And then your emotional immune system comes in and says, if you do that, you could be humiliated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you could do that, and that humiliation somehow gets equated with dying.
Yes.
With our brains.
Yeah.
At least that's what the theories are right now. But for whatever reason, we all seem to have this thing where we hear a good idea and we don't listen.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think it's like we have an idea that it should too. I think that the creative process should look a certain way. And I think, and tell me where I'm wrong, but it's like you maybe had this idea that like, I decided to write a screenplay. That's going to be my ticket to success. And so now that I need to carry on. And it's like, we don't account for like, sometimes it's like the creative process is like, oh, but go over here. Right. And you're just like, what?
Yeah, I just started a new podcast and it's called Create Out Loud, and just to have these conversations with creators of all different fields. And I was just having a conversation, it won't release for weeks, with a woman named Krista Couture, who has a memoir out called How to Lose Everything, about the tragedies in her life. And she's a singer-songwriter and a memoirist and a broadcaster. And her whole thing is connecting the dots. And I love that. Like I try to have a takeaway from every podcast for myself and the listeners. I'm like, we get so, I mean, that happened to me in my 20s, a screenwriting story, not in my 20s anymore. And that feeling that I had to have an identity as a certain kind of creator, right? Yeah. Or we do the flip, Brooke, which is, well, I'm not that.
Oh, yeah.
And so Krista was saying in her interview, I was a blogger, but when someone approached me about writing an essay for a collection, I was like, but I'm not a writer, and she had produced like 4 albums by this point as a singer-songwriter, right? So we have all these labels. Yeah. And I think we do that out of safety. We do that out of, I'm this, not that. And then I know this box. And I do that. It's very hard for me. I've started to want to flirt with, I haven't said this to publicly, with poetry, with writing poetry. I'm scared to death. I'm not even talking about calling myself a poet. I'm just like, am I allowed to do
this? Yes, totally. Okay, so this whole question of like identity and like how we label ourselves, actually, it's so perfect how you set me up for this moment of like, okay, so I started my business 3 years ago, and I started as a copywriter, and I was actually working mainly with life coaches, which is so fun because I followed a lot of coaches and it was super fun. And then I got to a point where I was like, it was just like jamming. Like my business was just like not working. Something was like stuck. And I was working with a coach, and she just said to me one day, she said, I have this hunch that you're not a copywriter. You're just a writer. And I was like, whoa, right? And it was like my whole nervous system kind of like settled down. And I swear to God, she sent me your website and she's like, do you know Jen Louden? And she's like, she runs writing retreats and she has this membership like Oasis, and she, and I was like, oh, this is what it was just like all, like everything lit up for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I think I was doing this thing of like, my novel was coming out, but it wasn't out yet. And I was sort of like, I have to make money over here using my skill as a writer, but for business. Right. And like, this is just my passion project. Right. Like I can't. And so, just like, what is that?
Again, I don't think everybody does it, Brooke, but I completely relate. I just did some business development work yesterday with a woman named Maggie Patterson, who I highly recommend. She especially works with people who have agencies and service-oriented businesses, but she also does some work with people like my kind of business. And that was one of the things that I was asking her about, is I create these silos of projects, and and it's like somehow I get these blocks in my head that these can't relate to each other. Or I have a client who I coach, and she's a copywriter, a very successful copywriter, but she's also developing a brand that's a passion brand, if you will. And eventually she wants the passion brand to be the whole thing. But in the meantime, she's got 3 kids, you know.
Yeah.
And so we're always looking for how can we integrate the two. So I don't know why we do this, but what I think your question points to is we need models.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we need to be out there, and I sometimes forget that I need models, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I can model.
Yeah. It's just like one of my coaches talks about this, of like being an example of what is possible, that like, right. And I feel like I try to do that with the writers that I work with now. Right. So then, having seen your business model, I like created an in-person writing retreat that happened like 2 weeks before COVID. It was like, we had this gorgeous retreat. You got it in. Oh my gosh. But yeah, just, and sort of like getting to integrate, like you were saying, like integrate all the parts of me. And it's like, what if it didn't have to all be separate, right? Like, what if I didn't have to have like the business and the writing, and it could all just kind of like.
And how can it feed each other? And I think that's, you know, I see in the internet world, different people teaching and talking about, they're mostly bros. I haven't found any women doing it an interesting way yet, but like, how do we take in information and help it have idea sex? You know, how do we take in different, you know, how do I take in my client's book, Sell from Love, and have sex with Steven Pinker's sense of style?
Amazing.
You know, I don't know, but so, and so I think there's a way that we can develop systems. I haven't done this yet, but I'm thinking out loud here. Yeah. Can we develop systems where the different parts of our lives and the different parts of ourselves and our business can talk to each other more?
Yes.
As well as our reading and research. And
yeah,
I feel like that there's a lot of juice there for me too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love all of this so much. It's like, what if we could be all the things? Like, it's like, we don't have to. But
then I also point to, Brooke, though, that we do have to choose, because, you know, I'm a lot older than you are, but I only have so much energy and so much time in the day. And one of the things I'm working really hard at, and failing utterly, is to have more days that I'm not like 2 minutes before you and I started talking where I'm rushing to the bathroom, right? And then right after we get off this, rushing to do another call, and then rushing to do another call. And that is the flip side, right? Or the other side, or the shadow side of having a lot of passions and interests.
Yeah, I love this question. And it kind of goes really nicely with the part I actually read this morning around the whole concept of settle, like in Why Bother, you have this concept of like settle, and like all these beautiful quotes that I highlighted, but basically like you talked about this idea that we're addicted to productivity, which I can totally relate to. And like you had this beautiful quote from someone else, and I can't remember, but like about how we need to detox from the grind culture. And I was just
it's from the woman who does the nap ministry.
Oh yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. But just like, and again, this is a lesson that comes back to me. Like it's come back to me over and over and over. And I could still like, you had a lot of stories in the book about like going through depression and like also chronic pain. And I was like, I had a really severe chronic illness when I was in my 20s. And like, I was just like, I just keep relearning that like, there's no point if you don't have like that rest and that space. Like, it's just sort of like, what are we doing? Right. It's kind of.
And also we won't be able to bother about what we bother about, to go back to your first question or second question, you know, why don't we listen to that calls us? It's because we don't give ourselves any space to listen.
Yeah.
We just don't. And our nervous systems are hijacked. I mean, we have another murder by the police of a young black man today. Didn't happen today, but we're reckoning with, while another black man has been killed, the policeman is on trial, you know. And then we have COVID still, right? We have, you know, I'm vaccinated, but so much of the rest of the world isn't. All my clients and friends in other parts of the world aren't. I mean, we can just go on and on and on. And then we have, you know, this that can go off at any moment. And we're training ourselves, and we're being trained to not be able to be with ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think if there's anything that can keep us from bothering, it's that. And it's so basic. But if you really go through your day and you notice, how many times do you want to settle? How many times do you want to feel? How many times do you need to grieve? Like today and yesterday, like my husband kept looking at me going, what is the matter? I'm like, I keep thinking about that boy. I keep thinking, young man. I keep thinking about his family. I keep thinking about all the people that are going to be traumatized by this.
Yeah.
So how do we make space for that? And then, so I got that on one hand today. And on the other hand, I'm like, my podcast just went live. We've been working so hard, you know, like, whoa, emotional whiplash, right?
Yeah.
So we have to have some space in our day, or I think we lose ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even if we do have space, sometimes it's not enough. Like I had space this morning and then the rest of the day's been crazy. And I'm like, okay, I have to here's my life. I'm going to take the dogs to the vet. They both have something different wrong with them at 6. And you have to wait in the car because it's still social distance. I'm like, that's some more time to settle right there. So we can look for these moments and kind of save up the emotions. We can journal with them. We can meditate. We can make space for them to welcome them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And even like you said, you're like, my day is crazy. And also like that you have this intention of like, when I'm sitting in the car with my dogs, I'm going to take that moment for me, as opposed to like, it can be so easy just to be like, I'm back on the phone and I'm answering email.
Right.
And it's just like,
right. Oh God, I can totally do that. Yeah. Just, automatically, like it's in your hand and you don't even realize it got there.
Yeah.
What
I started having to do is, so I have 2 little kids who are 4 and 1. And so when they come home from daycare, I leave my phone upstairs and then I'm downstairs for like 2 or 3 hours, because I found that even if I put it in a drawer, I was always like, is that person,
it's there?
Me? Like I heard it buzzing, who texted? It's just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I do the same thing. I leave it downstairs at night and this all as it takes is just a crack in if my daughter and I are texting with each other.
Yeah.
And then I'll take it upstairs with me. But then what I do is I leave it in the bathroom or the closet, right? So it's like I can't hear it. It's far enough away.
Yeah. That helps. That helps the transition.
And then I usually don't have it out here with me, but I just recorded another podcast episode and then I need it in case there's a problem. So yeah, there's always these little ways that it worms its way back in.
I hear that. Oh my gosh. Well, I would love to hear so I heard you say you're starting a podcast, and are there other creative dreams that are percolating? Are you kind of in the fertile void space? What's happening for you creatively?
I did something really stupid, which is I had 11 years of failed projects. Now that's not the stupid part, failed book projects. That's not the stupid part. We all have projects that fail, but I kept telling myself I had to write the big book. So for a while it was a novel, then it was a memoir. I kept raising the stakes on myself. And so when I finally wrote Why Bother, which rose out of a memoir that didn't work, and the lessons I learned looking at my life through that lens, I had so much expectations for this book. Like, this was the book I've always wanted to write. And then COVID hit. And all of our plans to promote were canceled. We pivoted, but we didn't pivot. I was totally freaked out. My brain and creativity were not at their best. They're still not. And so the book's done fine, but it's not done anything like I fantasized.
Yeah.
And it really took the wind out of my sails creatively. So the book is almost a year anniversary. I'm just starting to get it back. And I'm just starting to ask, is it poetry? Do I want to play with that?
Yeah.
Do I want to play with painting again? The podcast feels creative for sure, but it also feels in some ways, I want it to be an act of generosity. I want it to be an act of service, both for the people who listen, so they'll create out loud, but also to help get the word out about people's work. I mean, we have some famous people on, but we're also having people on that people don't know.
Yeah.
Because I felt like people weren't generous with me when my book came out, and I want to be one. I always try, I fail, but I try to take those times when I get really hurt and go, okay, well, how could you do something different in the world? Because I'm sure you're stingy with your sharing of people's work too. So that's percolating. And then I had the terrifying idea of writing fiction again this past weekend. And I really just went, please go away.
I can understand.
I do not have the bandwidth for you at all. Please go away.
Yes. Yeah, I'm working on my second novel and I'm just like, well, I think the one interesting thing that's coming up is like, I really do notice I have less of an attention span than I did. I wrote Catchlight, it was finished in like 2014. So like, and then I worked on some other things and I had my kids. And so now, but I'm like, I can't like, even if I had an hour of time, I can't like.
Oh yeah, you're in the crunch years, man. You're in the crunch years.
Yeah.
I was writing books then, but it was my way. It was how I made a living. You know, for the first 15 years of my career, I made a living through writing,
Yeah.
and some speaking and some brand work for sure. But a lot of it was writing and royalties. So you just did it, you know. And also, writing a novel is so different than writing a self-help book
Yeah,
because
totally.
there's lots of discrete bits and not a lot of,
Yep.
you know, there's no narrative work. I do want to say another thing I'm excited about, though. I started this little tiny project. I haven't promoted it yet. It's called Create Plus Climate. And it's bi-monthly, twice a month. I put out prompts and ideas for creatives to talk about the climate crisis in their own creative way. And it may never come to anything, but I've committed to doing it for a year. And it's helping my climate anxiety.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. How can people find that or get involved?
Yeah, if you were a person who could tell you that right off the top of their head, that would be really good. I'm going to go look at my website and tell you what that is while you ask me another question.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Okay, so my last question is, so the way I conceptualize this series is I'm talking to authors who I perceive are writing brave. I think that's one of my anthems, is this idea of like writing brave and sort of vulnerability and, you know, like you said, creating out loud. So what helps you write brave and really like show up in an out loud way?
That's such a good question. I think one of the things I've worked really hard, and I will continue probably to work really hard at for the rest of my life, is feeling the truth of what I'm saying, what I'm trying to say, and trying to navigate towards that truth through my body. You can see me closing my eyes maybe, and you know, there's a way that I can posture or please or use language to obscure. And that's one thing that I'm always trying. I think for me, writing brave is going, yeah, that's as true as I can be. Is there anything truer I can say? And it doesn't have to be self-revealing. It doesn't have to be memoir, right? It can be, is that the truest thing I know to say about this subject? So when I write my blog / newsletter every week, it's usually about creating. Like, is that the truest thing I can say about that? Yeah.
Yeah. I love that as a benchmark. And even like you said, it's like, there's a lot of things you could say, but what's the truest thing? It's like, I feel that in my heart too.
Yeah. And I found the link for Create Plus Climate. So it's jenniferlouden.com /create -climate.
Awesome. Okay. I'll put the link in the comments below. So we'll have that for you too. So thank you so much. This has been such a fun conversation.
Oh, I could talk to you all day. I wish you so much luck with your writing and your business and your clients. I'm sure they're very lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you. And best of luck for the poetry, whatever might come through. Secrets. And I just put this sticky on my computer today, which is have fun and learn something new. And I felt like I just needed to remember that it could be that simple.
Yeah. The last question I ask people in the podcast is, what will you learn next?
Ooh.
So I like to think about that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Writing Brave, which is my monthly author interview series. For more tips on the writing life and how to connect with your intuition to make writing your next book easier and more fun, subscribe to my channel. You can also join my free writing community on Facebook. It's called Writer's Haven, and there is a link to join below. See you next time.